Hi, welcome to Nothing Ventured, Nothing Game. I'm your host with the most, your GM Jared. And tonight, tonight, whatever time it is by you, I'm joined by Steve.
Yep.
Our eternal game arbiter. And yeah, I like game arbiter more than rules lawyer. It sounds fancier. And in my head, you're the guy from Halo, the arbiter. So today, me and Steve were actually chit-chatting about this, and it's come up a few times. And I guess the best way to phrase this is how to steal something from another tabletop role-playing game and use it in your game. And yeah, because it's a really cool concept. And why not bring it into Pathfinder 2nd edition? Like, it doesn't hurt anyone, and it does a lot. It brings a lot to the table as a game master and a kind of game designer, right? If you're homebrewing, you're game designing, you're designing a game world and everything in it, even the rules. So what this is the legendary and lair actions from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Now, if you haven't heard or maybe never experienced legendary and lair actions, a quick recap. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the greater details, but legendary actions is something for a monster who is legendary. So in Pathfinder 2nd edition, this would be Tree Razor. This would be Tar Baphomet. This would be a named NPC that you've heard of before, even like a vampire lord, or in your homebrew world, maybe it's the Lich that the players are going to deal and fight with. And what they get are these special abilities, and they get to use them on their turn or off turn. They have 3 points in 5th edition. It goes from anywhere from 1 to 3 points, but most legendary monsters have 3 points, and then they can use them whenever they want. So it might be like a Lich, or the Lich can counter spell more than once. Like, it's no longer a reaction. They have these legendary points, and they could just burn this point to instantly counter spell. Or a like Tree Razor, maybe they have, if you look at the stat block for this entity, he had, right, like it's a pterodactyl-esque demon lord monster, and they have special abilities. Maybe they can use those abilities more than once on their turn, and that's legendary actions. That's what they get. Maybe it's a named dragon, whatever. The points refresh every turn, so it's kind of like a reaction. And then the lair action is basically a monster's lair. So think of, you're hunting the Hydra back to its lair, and in this area, the area itself is an entity in which you have to deal with stuff. So maybe the Hydra, it's not too high of a level, but because the Hydra is in its lair, all light sources or fire are reduced in the lair, and that's like a lair action. The lair has its own initiative, so it's very similar to a hazard or a trap, and Steve knows much about that, as Steve did a whole video on hazards and traps. So check it out. Links somewhere in the ether. I'm killing Steve. Steve's like, God damn it. But with the lair actions, it's again, you're fighting against this world, or this the area in which this entity kind of its home base, and that's what we wanted to talk about, is like kind of how to homebrew that into your world. So Steve, from your perspective of everything I just kind of spoke on, how would you start to bring that into the world?
Well, there's a couple of different ways you can look at this. You can, if you want to like custom either create a monster or give a monster just a little bit more flair, and it's not just a hobgoblin commander. It's not just some random enemy that the players have had. Maybe this is a culmination of, like, if you're playing an adventure path, or maybe trying to make your own adventure path, and this is a culmination of like a book, right? This is the final hurrah of this book, where the players have figured out what like a lower like lieutenant, right? But this is a major bad guy in this area, but that leads you to the next bad guy. Or maybe this is the final monster of the campaign. You want to make it memorable. You can, like I said, there's a couple different ways you can actually give them specialized reactions that happen. You can actually even just take this ability from 5th edition wholesale and put it into Pathfinder. Although I will preface that the monsters are balanced for the players at the moment. So if you add in more stuff that the monster can do, that may unbalance the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, you should always think of like what, not just give them some more stuff to do and don't make this like your monster. You want your monster to survive. So we're going to give you all these cool abilities, but make it memorable. Make it something that you would know that creature, that monster would do. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you can inform your decision on how you want to add these kind of special things. Maybe they didn't have these before. Maybe the players had interacted with this bad guy at one point and they didn't have these. And all of a sudden now they have these special actions that they can take. So something has changed. Maybe they got power granted from their, an evil priest, or take your pick of insert plot hook here of reasons they have extra powers. But so you can make it something that the players can discover about before they fight them.
I would say, so kind of bouncing off of your hobgoblin commando, right? Like your hobgoblin, your elite hobgoblin. Like maybe this is a platoon of hobgoblins that you're dealing with, and this character has lair actions versus legendary, right? Like, so you have to kind of keep that balance of like, which is worth it. Is this a lair situation or is this a legendary situation? So maybe like Nilbog, the hobgoblin general, is in their lair. So they're in their like little fortress. You've SEAL Team 6'd your way into the fortress, and now you're dealing with Nilbog in his main chamber. And you're a GM, and you're like, okay, so your lair action is Nilbog. You could write down like 2 lair actions, right? Like I don't think either one would be offensive. So you could say at start of initiative, Nilbog can summon lesser goblins, like just a whole mess of goblins into the room. So that's something like there's an infinite number of goblins. You have no idea where they're coming from. Maybe there's spawn gates. You have to go break the spawn gates, but also gives your players something to do besides just fire on this enemy. Maybe they want to start to, maybe your one of your players has a high craft check and quick repair, and they run over and they start to bar the gates. So now on their lair action turn initiative, start of around, Nilbog summons 1d6 extra goblins to the fight. But because they've barricaded the door, now it's 1d4 extra goblins to the fight, and that changes. And then you could say at the end of the round, Nilbog can, maybe he has explosives, right? Like if you read the Hobgoblin ancestry stuff, they talk about like they're smoke workers and the alchemy and is all part of their culture. Maybe he has like a little stick, and he just clicks it and explosions happen randomly on the map. And you could go around, like if you have 4 players, you could go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you roll, and that's where the explosion happens. Or you could have a dead zone. You could say like, okay, player 1 is 1, player 2 is 2, and 3, 4, and then 5 and 6 are dead zones. Like the explosion didn't work. He click, and nothing happened. And that's kind of a lair thing. And then a lot of times in our field of when we're GMing, it's either you put a really high hard monster against your team, but your team's always going to win because of action economy. That's kind of the thing, especially if you're dealing with players who have been playing together for a very long time. Action economy, they're very versed in action economy. You're going to have, maybe your caster, your bard, haste the barbarian. So now the barbarian has an extra turn, and the barbarian and the fighter have been working together for so long. The fighter trips the big bad, so the big bad's now prone, and the barbarian's like, well, 4 attacks, and you're flat-footed, and I'm about to unload all the damage. And yeah, so you have this big bad battle, right? And the guy's like, I'm gonna destroy the world, monologues. And then like 2 rounds later, the team destroyed them, is already counting coins. And that's kind of like wonky. Like you're like, okay. Or the opposite effect is You're the GM. You have the big bad, and then you're like, okay, I need to balance it. You know, I have a barbarian. Okay, so I'm going to throw 2 dire bears and like 6 goblins, and that should balance it. And then it swings in your favor so dramatically that the dire bears go from full health to like the next hit they die because they secretly had mange or something. You know what I mean? And then now it seems like you let your players win. You know, obviously, if you're allowed to, if you play like that, and you're not a GM who's like, nope, by the book. The code says you guys got yourself into this fight. You guys need to get yourself out of this fight.
Making encounters based on the charts in the book, the XP chart, how Pathfinder Second Edition makes like encounters, is actually pretty balanced. But for the most part, it's not. You fight a goblin, you fight a goblin, you fight a goblin. You're going to fight hobgoblins, you're going to fight hobgoblins. This is what allows you to make those special battles. This is not something that we suggest use for every single battle. But this is something that you can use for those special battles that make them... These are the ones... They're not going to remember when, oh man, do you remember when I rolled that 20? No, they're going to be like, remember when that hobgoblin like summoned 1,000 goblins? And we had to like torch through like swaths, like... That's what they're going to remember. They're going to remember those epic moments that occur, and fighting another hobgoblin that's the same as every other hobgoblin. It's just, eventually it gets boring. What you can do to add a little flair is by making like certain enemies, like the big bads, and make them threatening. But on the other side of it, because the game is so tightly wound with mechanics, so tightly balanced, if you make the appropriate party, and you really can't balance it, I can't tell you how much XP that this system is going to be worth. You have on the GM side, you kind of have to be on your game to know when, oh wait, this is either undertuned and it's not working and it's not giving the threat that I feel it should, or it's overtuned and if I don't do something quick, everyone's gonna die. And it wasn't an encounter and I wasn't planning on. Now, I'm not saying don't kill your characters, I'm not saying to kill your characters, but if you didn't plan on your characters dying in this, and this is a stepping stone to another even bigger fight, and you were like, oh man, I thought it would be cool, but now it's like, oh my god, this is gonna kill everybody in 2 turns. Everyone's dead in 2 turns. You have to be on your game to be able to pull back and have a reason to pull back and have no one realize you're pulling back.
Yeah. Well, the legendary actions do allow for that. If you forget to use those points, you don't stack them, right? That's the thing. They come and they go. So if you, and also, you know, your players don't know. Even if they make knowledge checks, they're not going to know whether or not you have legendary actions or a lair action. I wouldn't stack legendary and lair at the same time. I think that's like very overpowered.
Well, here's the thing is that if this is like a perfect thing, right? We have the Neilbog hobgoblin and he's calling more goblins, right? And he's shouting out more goblins. And the first round it happens and everyone's like, oh, that's so cool. And then the second round it happens. Okay, we didn't kill the first round of goblins. This is getting just tenuous. And then you realize, oh man, I'm going to have so many actions that someone's going down, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Neil Blog calls a third time, but you hear like off to the side that like, I'm not going in there. You go in there. I'm not going in. You saw 3 guys die. And then like you hear like the goblins arguing. That means no one's coming in this round.
Yeah.
So that's as you letting them know that you're giving a plausible reason for the action to occur and to not occur at the same time. Mm-hmm. So just be on your game with this when you're using these types of actions. And yet again, even the lair action in 5th edition, the lair action is something that the lair does on its own.
Yeah.
But you can make it to where this costs the reaction of the monster. Like the monster has to do something to the environment to like stoke the flames, and all of a sudden there's more heat damage or something, or whatever the case may be. If you want to add these things, you can maybe even make legendary actions, just make extra reactions for your character that your bad guy can take, and make it the player starts their turn. Right? That's the trigger, right? Because remember, every reaction has to have a trigger. Instead of being able to have like attack of opportunity, let's say the hobgoblin has attack of opportunity, but nobody's near the hobgoblin, right? And they're dealing with the goblins, all the thousands of goblins that you summoned. Give them another reaction that's like on the start of the player's turn, I get to do something. I get to command my goblins. Now I'm going to move my goblins. So that's all I'll let you do is just go get that guy, and they all move to somebody. Or maybe they get the free javelin attack at -5, or just you can come up with free reactions. So your monster, your big bad, is always doing something cool, but not necessarily it's always about attacking. It doesn't have to be always about attacking. It could be repositioning your bad guys. It could be giving a buff to the bad guys. Maybe it's like maybe he gives them kind of like a morale bonus, and they all get temporary hit points for like a round. Or they get better AC or something. You can always come up with these reactions, but it's costing them monster reactions. So you're not really giving them extra actions to do. You're giving them more variety of actions to do.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, you can always look at traps and hazards and reflavor them as your lair action, and even abilities that other classes have as your legendary reaction or action. So similar to what Steve said, the hobgoblin, that's a martial feature, a martial archetype. They have the ability to bolster their allies by either intimidation or diplomacy. So you could give them that feature, and you could write it down like, oh, they have this feature, but it's only at the start of the round can they do it into reaction, and they have to make a check. And I think that's fair. I think in that situation, you're still playing by the rules. And again, you're a GM. You can win, right? Like, again, this isn't like GM versus player. GMs can just win. I'll be like, oh, Red Dragon shows up, man. Like, what, you tell me no? You don't know my notes. You don't know what's happening in the background, right? Like, so in that scenario, as a GM, you will always win. And this is just more how to make your combat, how to make these monsters, these epic encounters feel epic. And I think that's the worst is when like you set up this bad or this like a lieutenant concept, and it just kind of falls flat because the players outpace you and outpace the monsters so quickly, so aggressively, and the players have magic items, and they're like, yeah, you could give your monsters magic items, but again, it's action economy. So suddenly you only have 3 actions. Okay, I'm going to use my wand, the fireball. That's 2 actions. And then my ring of the ram, one, single action to shoot one person. And that's my whole turn. But I didn't move. So now I'm still in this spot. And all of a sudden, that's when the entire team goes Nova. Everyone's just fireball, fireball, fireball. But if you can say, talking like maybe this is a evil wizard, you could say the lair dampens magic, so it's a flat 5 check, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, wait, what? Yep, it's like being stupefied. It's rough, but it's a flat 5 check to cast your spells, to have them go off properly, or it adds another action, right? Like it just doesn't have to kill the turn; it could just add, and like you could spend an action to make sure it goes off, but that all of a sudden that telekinetic projectile goes from 2 actions to 3, and you're like, do I want to do that? And that's how you kind of add this to the game. Remember, you could steal right from 5th edition, and that's perfectly fine. But it's trying to find those tweaks that make this feasible for Pathfinder 2nd edition. And that's the key. 2nd edition is a very well-tuned machine. And the moment you kind of throw, a little bit into it, it can sway it very quickly.
Yeah. Like I said, just to be mindful of the situation, and you can even, if you really wanted to, you can even make actions based on the round it is. And that's the other thing is like, this is an escalating thing that'll eventually come to a head. Because I remember, just like we all know, monsters' lives, even big bad's lives, are measured in rounds of combat because they don't last that long, especially if there's only like one monster. Like if we don't talk about one monster or a very few powerful monsters, that lets all the players focus all of their effort on 1 or 2 things, and those things tend to get burned down pretty quickly. So these actions could help bolster and make combat be more tenuous, or at least feel tenuous for the players. It goes, oh wait, this is round 5? Like combats don't go this long. And like, something's happening, something's brewing. Or it could be like a build up to a big thing. So you don't know. So just build this in. Like I said, not necessarily for every combat, because it will be a lot of work for you on the DM side, but these are for those special encounters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly what Steve said. I mean, look at the movie Conan the Barbarian. They the moment they put the horn in that, was it the Barbarian or was it the Conqueror? It was one of the
No, it was
Arnold
that was the
Schwarzenegger.
first. That was the first one. I think. No, it was the second one because they
No,
got the
second
thief
one.
in there. The second one was
Yeah.
the thief.
Yeah. And they put the horn, and then the thing become a big monster, and then the entire team went Nova. They killed the big god monster in like 2 turns. Like, if you look at this scenario, what's happening is like Conan shows up, it grapples him, he gets all Arnold Schwarzenegger, he just and then stabs it, and then it dies, and then they win. So, like we've been rambling on. The concept of the lair and the legendary action is something just to enhance those really big or epic encounters that you really want to make memorable. Obviously, you're going to have to tweak it to your own campaign to see how it works for your own characters. I would use this, obviously a big bad, a named character, something that's happening, that's important. That's when I would use it as the GM. Rules Arbiter.
I was about to say that you could also use this as a big reveal of someone you don't know is a bad guy. Right? All of a sudden, the discussion with this NPC that you've known for a while starts going south, and all of a sudden they activate a villain action or a legendary action out of nowhere. So,
yeah, like we said, tweak it to your own campaign. If you want, you can come up with a few actions on the fly, or jot them down on a postcard. A post-it note, and you could say, okay, on turn 1 this happens. If a player does this, this happens, and these are the legendary actions they have, or specific lair actions. That's how I would play it. I feel it's something small enough that would take your game, your combat encounters, these epic combat encounters, to a whole nother level. It's keep an eye out because it will definitely be showing up on our podcast. Maybe the next podcast episode, whenever this gets released, it'll either have happened or will be happening. But with that being said, we are Nothing Ventured, Nothing Game. I'm your GM, Jared, and Steve.
Yep.
And want to say thank you for listening, and have a great day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to us. It's always a pleasure, and thank you. Good night.
Later.